Whatever viral thread's going around, if I miss it, I miss it. There's going to be another one. As much as this stuff penetrates into our daily discourse, it does not require my attention 24/7. And I think more highly of myself than to do that.
Welcome to Culture Just Weird. Are we just going to start with this? Just start with nothing?
I'm Kayla.
I'm Chris. And this is Culture Just Weird.
We got to get our shit together, man.
Let's do it again.
We still don't know the way to introduce this podcast. I don't think we need to do it again. I just think we need to admit to our listeners that 4 seasons in, we are still figuring ourselves out.
This was just welcome to Culture Just Weird. I'm Chris. I'm a game designer and data scientist.
I'm Kayla. I am a TV writer. Currently unemployed. Hire me.
But then the thing is, it's like, then I want to say, and this is, you know what I mean? Like that.
Then do it that way. Try it that way. Say, hey.
So just names first and then Culture Just Weird.
I'm Chris.
You're Kayla.
Okay, introduce yourself.
I'm Chris. And I'm a data scientist and game designer.
I'm Kayla. I'm a television writer.
And this is Culture Just Weird. Welcome to the show.
Our podcast. Sorry, I stepped on you.
We almost had it. That was pretty good, though.
We'll have it better next time.
How are you doing today, Kayla?
You know what? I know what you're talking about in this episode, so I don't. Should I say how I really am doing if it spoils your topic?
I don't know. Like, are you doing really poorly?
I am honestly in some need of some self-care.
Oh, you are?
I am, and I'm not saying that just to tee you up. I'm saying that because I just finished up a job, and so now I am in that post-job phase where
malaise phase.
Not even a malaise, but where I know, like, okay, I can do all of the things that I've been putting off, but also my body needs to rest, but also I have ADHD, so it's really hard to, like, actually rest and not constantly be going. And also there's just a lot of other things to do, so I'm like, I gotta do all the things, and I'm not taking the time to, like, shower every day, or go for a walk every day, or have a cup of tea, or have coffee with you in the night. Like
tea.
Well, now tea's ruined.
Better than others.
I'm just saying I'm in a phase of my life right now where I could really do with a reminder on how to care for oneself. So I'm very interested in what you have for us today, spoiling it for the audience.
Gotcha. I mean, it sounds like you're probably beyond help.
I'm always beyond help.
Yeah, I mean, your situation just sounds dire.
Yeah.
Well, before we get to that, we do need to do some business, which specifically is, if you want to hear more Culture Just Weird, go to our Patreon and sign up, just like these next 3 folks did. Thank you so much to Instantly Joy, David Whiteside, and Jade A., all who signed up for our Patreon over these past 2 weeks. Thank you so much for supporting the show.
Did you say Jade Egg?
No, A, the letter A, Jade A. Are you like the yoni egg, like the goop egg?
Yeah. Don't say goop egg.
Well, it's a goop egg.
Gwyneth Paltrow's wellness company scam egg that you put in your vagina.
It's from literally the company is Goop.
Yeah.
Probably gets a little goopy.
Stop.
It's really perfect. But no, Jade A, just the letter A, and we really shouldn't be making.
Yeah, apologies to associate you with the Jade Egg. Jade
yes,
A. Thank
this
you
is just
for
a person who is supporting us. We shouldn't be associating.
Yeah, thank you for supporting us.
So yeah, Kayla, you just mentioned how we can never drink any tea anymore because
ruined.
It's all ruined. So I think it's appropriate to begin today's episode by doing like a nice, smooth segue from our last episode. I'm not going to do the usual thing where we tell people to shut off the podcast and like go download that one and listen to it instead. But I am going to say at the top of the show here that we are going to be building off of that topic, the topic of self-care. And before I go any further, I just want to reemphasize a point that you made last episode. Specifically, nobody should feel bad or guilty or even awkward about drinking any brand of tea, celestial or otherwise. And I want to extend that to other aspects of our collective existence too. Like, don't feel guilty if you can't afford a Tesla and need to fill your car up with hydrocarbon fuel to go to work. Don't feel bad because you own some LuLaRoe leggings and maybe you even have a pair you kind of like. I'm going to go so far to say that if you're a person of privilege, white or otherwise in our society, it's counterproductive for you to feel guilty for participating in a culture that you didn't really have a hand in building. There's a reason why this podcast has a seeming never-ending flow of content. There's a reason why so often things will happen to you, like they happened to Kayla when she was doing the research for last episode, where you're just trying to enjoy some goddamn tea. And then you peek under the rock and, oh shit, there's some ugly and dangerous racism under there. Our culture is transitioning, and God willing, we all live long enough to witness more fruits of that transitioning. But what we are transitioning away from is a bedrock of, and especially in America, colonialism and Puritanism. Now, don't straw man me here. This is not me saying that the American experiment is inherently 100% evil all the time. Americans have many achievements to be proud of, and some of them are even ethical. So don't get caught up on that. But what I am saying is that if you build things on a bedrock of slavery or of forced population relocation of native people and of empire building, well, that turns into things like redlining or problematic police enforcement or even weirdos like John Kellogg. And since none of this stuff happened very long ago, well, that means that you might find yourself eating some perfectly innocent breakfast cereal that has a pretty monstrous origin story. But it's important for us to not get caught up in the guilt and the shame of all these various institutions that we've inherited. It's not good for you, you don't deserve it, and it doesn't help make anything better. If you want to separately help make the world a better place to live, then that is awesome. Cool. Go do some beach cleanup or something. I don't know. I'm just pulled that right out of the air. But if you want to do something like that, that's awesome. But it's going to be
lowest stakes of fixing the systemic issues.
Actually, Kayla, there's been some research done on like what the source of like ocean gyre garbage is.
What's ocean gyre?
So like the Pacific garbage patch.
What's gyre though?
Gyre is just a word for like the circular motion of the water on a large scale.
Never heard that.
Anyway, most trash in the ocean actually does float back and forth between beaches for a very long time before it actually goes out to the deep ocean. Oh. So cleaning up beaches is actually cleaning up the ocean, as a matter of fact.
Good to know.
And I also wouldn't say like, if you only go to the beach and like pick up one piece of trash, like, fuck you, that's not enough. No, go do it. Yeah. Pick up one piece of trash and don't worry about it. That's kind of what I'm saying here, right? Like it's going to be hard to consistently try to make a world a better place if you're constantly worrying about like whether every step you take might be through a red line district or every sip of tea you take might have a history of eugenics.
Guilt and shame
doesn't help anyone.
Powerful motivators for making change. If you want to make change, then you kind of have to eschew the guilt and the shame. I don't know if I'm saying that word right. Eschew? Eschew?
ASKEW.
ESCHEU.
I think it's eschew.
Eschew?
Eschew.
Well, just guilt and shame are traps. Try not to fall into them.
And I will even go one step further and say, like, don't even, like, let go of even the, this must be for societal change, and just try to let go of the guilt and shame for your own benefit. It's for you. And then the societal change can come when you are healthy, and all that stuff is like, I think needs to be like it can't be the reason that you are not feeling guilty about drinking whatever tea you're drinking.
One day in a different episode, we'll do an episode this season on what personal stake means when it comes to social justice issues, systemic issues, and your place in the struggle for change.
Yes. But this episode is about personal self-care. So I know last episode you didn't really wind up even really getting into the self-care aspects of tea.
I want to do self-care. Uh-oh. Racism.
You were like, tea's nice. And then you sort of fell down a bit of a rabbit hole.
Here's a problem. Anyway, bye.
Right. But that's where you started. You started with the self-care stuff. And that was your jumping off point. There are other tools in both of our self-care toolboxes other than just, drinking a nice hot beverage, which we'll get to. But it got me wondering, what are other folks carrying around in their self-care toolboxes? Is there some actionable info for us there for our audience?
Is there?
Do you like that voice that I just,
I
I
hope
don't
that
know
your
why.
answer-
I have no idea why I did that. I really don't.
I hope that your answer is no. There's not.
No. Get fucked. This has been Culture Just Weird. Bye-bye.
Man, but like
That would be
truth-
really funny.
That
if
would
we-
be, truth be told, it really does feel like that sometimes, though. It really does feel like in
Yeah.
our current society where, like, wages are zero, everything is extremely expensive, you can't afford to live in an apartment, you can't afford to live in a house, you can't afford your health care. It, like, really feels like racism is rampant and going unacknowledged. People are getting killed in the streets, like, whatever. There's huge wars happening. The world's on fire. It really feels like, okay, yeah, there's nothing you can do. Bye. But
yeah. Well, right.
there are things we can do.
There are things we can do, and you know, we could also talk ad nauseum about like how difficult it can be, how much of a challenge, and that you shouldn't be faced with all of this self-care. Like, you shouldn't have to like overcome all of these insane things that are happening. Unfortunately, that's the reality. I kind of want to go back to what we talked about in the very first episode of the season, where it's like, yeah, we shouldn't have to deal with this fire hose of shit, of misinformation. Like, this should be something that the people in power should be taking care of. Should be something that we have systems to combat. That, like, it sucks that this falls onto us, the individual, just like everything else. I wish it didn't. It's super unfair that it does. Given that it does, here's some stuff to do. Like, that's kind of what that episode was about, like, for misinformation. Maybe this is kind of what this episode is about, but in terms of like helping keep yourself healthy and sane.
Right. How to cope with the situation. And I think that I've seen this conversation happen a lot more now about reckoning with the fact that, like, there are aspects of our society that we can't, like, mental health away, that we can't, like, therapy away, that we can't self-care away. And that's so real and valid. Like, it is frustrating to be told maybe by a therapist or a doctor that, like, oh, these feelings that you're having are the result of cognitive distortions, when maybe they're actually the result of, like, having a minimum wage job and an apartment that costs more than you make in a month.
Right.
And also, regardless of the realities that our systems put us in, having ways to cope with those realities, like, that's a necessary for anyone, regardless of your level of privilege, I think.
And that's kind of our theme for this season too, right? Is like actionable stuff that will help you. So hopefully some of these things that we'll talk about today will fall into that bucket. And so if we're looking for other folks' toolboxes, other folks' self-care toolboxes, I figured, why not tap into our very own Cult or Just Weird Trust Network.
Ooh, you're doing the voice again.
Why I'm doing the voice again. Why I don't even know what
I don't know
really
what it is either, but you can keep doing it if you want.
I would like to not.
Oh.
So I figured, why not ask people we already know and like? So a few weeks ago, I sent an email to literally every single guest we've had on the show here before, even people we interviewed offline, and I asked them about their self-care practices, and I actually got a pretty robust response.
People want to talk about this stuff.
Out of the 22 guests we've had on the show, or 26 if you count offline interviews and Patreon content, 27 if you count tulpas. It's actually like not, it's a little mincier than that because like there's some.
Like, you didn't ask every single tulpa that I talked to, and you didn't ask every single.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's the number of emails that I sent. We got 12 responses.
Damn.
Want to hear what friends of Cult or Just Weird had to say?
I really do.
Good. But first, sources. Actually, wait, these folks are the sources for this episode, so I guess we'll just take care of that as we go along. For reference, though, here is the prompt that I sent to folks. Quote, what are some of the self-care strategies, processes, activities, etc., which you personally employ in order to stay healthy, fulfilled, and or sane, or struggle to do so if the case may be? An addendum, especially if your work or your hobbies involve crummy topics like extremism research. End quote. So you'll notice that missing from the prompt is like a precise definition of self-care. I think that's okay. I think there's a good shared understanding of the meaning of the phrase, and I deliberately wanted folks to kind of answer how they saw fit. But my own personal understanding of the phrase is similar to the things you would get from, say, dictionary.com, which is the act of attending to one's physical or mental health, generally without medical or other professional consultation, or from lexico.com, the practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. So I think those are pretty close to how I would define the word myself.
I would say self-care means
Oh, let's get the Kayla definition. That's the end of the
taking care
of
yourself.
one's. Ooh, wow, that is so insightful.
I know.
Thank you.
You're
That added a
welcome.
lot.
I'm a writer.
All right, let's see. Didn't you just ask for a job a few minutes ago?
Give me a job. You can expect gems like that.
All right, so let's see what our friends had to say. I will start with Dr. Gorski, since he's the record holder here on the show. He's been a guest on Culture Just Weird twice. Once was to talk about anti-vax back at the beginning of last season, and once was in our first season to talk about epigenetics and MTHFR. MTHFR.
You forgot the
MT
trick.
Jafar.
MT Jafar.
MT Jafar.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's season 3, episodes 1 and 2, and season 1, episodes 18 and 19, if you're curious. But Dr. Gorski had to say, quote, "I'm not sure I have an answer for this. Other than going to the gym, I don't know that I have anything I'd call a mental health routine," end quote.
Dr. Gorski, let's
which
talk.
I thought, well, I thought that was, I didn't want to like paraphrase that, because I thought it was important to hear that, like, yeah, sometimes it's like, it's hard to make time for yourself. Sometimes it's hard to, and especially with him, he's like super busy.
Let's not forget what Dr. Gorski's life is. He's
a
not
surgeon.
just a like science and skepticism blogger who does a lot of work actively combating people popping up with these bad ideas on the daily. Yeah, he's also a practicing surgeon.
Right. However, we did chat. I did reply to him, and we chatted a little bit about. I was like, "Hey, what about your puppy rescuing? I'm pretty sure that counts." And he was like, "Oh yeah, okay, you can talk about that."
Right, the puppy rescuing.
I know. Yeah. So have you've seen his Instagram, right?
I have not looked at it recently, but
it's puppies.
Yeah, it's puppies.
It's great.
It's puppies.
So
Puppies and gym, great. Puppies and moving your
that's
body.
a good combo.
Awesome combo.
We also heard from Mr. Travis View of the QAnon Anonymous podcast, whom we interviewed last season. If you listen to that episode, we did ask him a very similar question.
Yeah, near the end of last season, we started like asking people this. Clearly, we're building up to this season.
Right. This is the episode where we're just sort of like, let's just lean into it and just ask everyone and get it out of the way. But I'll say he was remarkably consistent on this front. Quote, "My main mental health strategy is just going for a hike and taking pictures. It's helpful because it's the exact opposite of the kind of work I do for QAnon Anonymous. When researching QAnon or extremism, I try to find human-created ugliness in the digital world. But while hiking and taking pictures, I try to find beauty in the natural physical world. I have an infrequently updated Instagram where I post my favorite photos."
See,
End quote.
I love this so much because that's something that I've noticed in myself, both with, the quote-unquote work we do for the podcast and also just like my life. I spend a lot of time mentally in the digital realm.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to remember to look up and be in the physical world. And it's so important to remember that we live in this
Touch that
world.
grass.
This is the world that we live in, not the world on the phone. And obviously that's a very privileged position to be in where I'm like, I spend all my time on my phone. And also it's the reality for millions and millions of people that we are
Kayla, this is
on
a
this
guilt-free
phone.
episode.
I'm not talking about guilt. I'm talking about acknowledging the reality that when I talk about self-care, I'm coming from a very middle-class perspective.
Sure.
And that is not the perspective that a lot of people have.
Of course.
I never want to ignore that fact because I do think in these conversations about self-care that can get ignored.
Right.
And again, not coming from a place of guilt or shame. I have no guilt or shame around that.
Good.
Actually, I probably do, but I'm trying not to project it here. Anyway, I really respond to that idea of if you find yourself spending too much time or feeling like you're spending too much time in a digital realm, if you have the means to remind yourself to be in the physical world, like take that time to do that.
Yeah, maybe we should have prefaced with this, but we are not medical professionals giving medical advice. This is just us telling you guys things that we do and things that our guests do. Hopefully that'll jog your creativity or motivation in this area. But along those lines, I'll say that I remember when we used to take walks towards the beginning of the pandemic, when everything was, granted, everything seems crushingly bleak now too, but
different kind of crushingly
different kind
bleak,
of crushingly bleak. Going outside for a walk after being inside all day, like scrolling Twitter and seeing like such and such shut down, NBA shut down,
Right.
this city has these deaths, constantly tracking the number of deaths, constantly tracking the hospitalizations, going outside, being reminded like, oh, the outside is still here.
Right.
The earth continues to spin.
Right.
There may be bad things happening, but you know, the sun continues to rise and
Right.
set. It's a nice thing to ground yourself that way, I think. So I do like Travis's approach.
Touch grass.
Touch grass, folks. We also talked to Mr. Matthew Remsky of the Conspirituality podcast last year. I think it was this consecutive episode with our Travis View interview. He got back to us on this as well, which is good, since if you listen to our first episode this season, you know that the season's theme is partially a result of our chat with him. And as you may know from listening to our show, he is a very thoughtful communicator. He tells us, quote, "Well, you got me going." More than 2 sentences, I'm afraid. Please attribute to Matthew Remsky, co-host of Conspirituality podcast. Because in my email, I said like, oh, no more than 2 sentences is fine. Because I didn't want to like,
Pressure.
I didn't want to pressure people. I didn't want to like say like, you owe me a bunch of paragraphs or whatever.
Right.
So,
Right.
And then he says, thanks for asking. People rarely do, and I think it's pretty crucial. For me, the real dangers of this work become apparent when I feel myself wither with cynicism about impossible tasks and curdle with hatred for sociopaths. These are necessary pathways. Tasks can always be reframed for workability and meaning, and there's no point in hating sociopaths. They can't feel it and wouldn't care if they did. They are running a different operating system. My personal corrective for the cynicism is to recognize that cultic dynamics are quite mundane. They're not a bug of human societies, but ubiquitous enough to almost be a core feature. A cult is an exploitation machine, just like late capitalism. Instead of resources, it extracts emotional capital. Both exploit labor, in both the profits flow to the top and the shit rolls downhill. When you're inside one or the other, you may feel like something is wrong, but it takes a lot of effort to break the spell. Thinking of the cult as a hotspot or intensification of how the larger system works relieves me of the misanthropic feeling that some zones of human community, cults, are just irreparably gross or cancerous. It's more like the whole body of humanity is vulnerable, and in some parts the vulnerability is accelerated. So you study the acceleration and help those survivors as a noble task, but also because it teaches you something about the larger systems of power and oppression. I have personally found that it feels a lot better to work with cultic dynamics in a way that speaks to the whole culture rather than speaking into a distinct zone of trauma. It helps me get out of my own story at the appropriate time. There's something comforting and depersonalizing about this broader political lens. It means that anti-cult work can be done in many ways. Organizing for human rights becomes anti-cult work. Fighting for the marginalized or for climate justice becomes anti-cult work. And that means you can spend a little less time thinking about fucking cults. As for which I would love to do.
Over.
The end. As for shifting hatred for sociopaths, as I said, it's like hating a stone. It's just there and it won't give a shit. So what I'm trying to do these days is lean into the lesser villains I learn about and think about how much pain it costs to have those levels of narcissistic need. It helps my heart to consider it and to see the child in the man, to wonder what went wrong. Then I naturally look at my own children a little differently, think more broadly about their needs, and feel more patience wash over me. It must suck so hard to be malignant, terrified of losing power over others because you're actually nothing inside, and I wouldn't wish it on anyone, and when I really feel this empathy, I am somehow refreshed. Finally, I haven't been as inspired by anyone as much as by the people I've interviewed who have lost their partners or family members to conspirituality or cults, and yet maintain their love and care for them. People can weather so much, and taking in those stories fills me up. End quote. As we said, the man has a way with words.
The end. End of the show. Thank you for all of that. Okay, there's a lot going on in that response. And I think that you should probably,
There's a lot to unpack.
Post the text somewhere for folks to read, because it feels like that's something beautiful to continue to return to. Because there's a lot going on. The thing that I have in my head to immediately respond to is pointing out that basically all healing work, all justice work, all peeling back the layers to look at the darkness underneath, all that work is interconnected. Mm-hmm. And I think for a lot of people that maybe feel compelled to talk about these kinds of things or feel compelled to try and enact change in the world or fix systems or right the wrong, when you feel drawn to that kind of stuff, it's really difficult to not feel drawn to all of it and feel responsible for taking care of all of it. I have to go to every protest for every cause, and I have to donate to every cause, and I have to do every event. And if I'm not, okay, so if I focus on healthcare over here, then I'm not focusing on climate change. And if I'm focusing on racism over here, then I'm not focusing on zoning laws in my state. If I'm not
it'll
focusing
rip your
on
brain apart.
voter
Yeah,
rights, and then
yeah.
if I'm not doing all of it, then who's going to do it? Well, luckily, there are 8 billion of us on this planet. And we've got a great little Swiss cheese system going where if you've got some cheese, we all have the ability to enact change in small ways that then contributes to greater change. I can't do it all. You can't do it all. But if I can...
hello, speak for
fuck
yourself
up.
over there.
If I do my little corner of work over here and you do your little corner of work over there and enough people do that, then that's enough like Swiss cheeses overlapping so that there's no one's falling through the holes.
Swiss cheese metaphor.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's like what they do with airplane stuff. Like airplane safety is a Swiss cheese thing. Where it's like if
redundant systems? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, redundant systems. And like enough Swiss cheeses get stacked up, there's no holes going all the way through, right?
It's like way too much Swiss cheese, though. That's like a big
it
block
works.
of cheese.
Anyway, what I'm saying
very
is that
strong tasting cheese.
if you are doing work if you're donating money to climate justice, that little corner of work has a ripple effect that affects all of the other things that you're concerned about. If you're worried about homelessness prevention or homelessness outreach, if you are working in a healthcare justice space, you're affecting that. Any little thing that you do in order to heal these larger systems contributes to all of it. And so I think it's really hard for the people that are worried about those things to remember that and to take that in and to really feel that and internalize it of, I cannot do it all, and trying to do it all is going to make me do nothing. And so I need to find my little corner of work and trust that other people are doing their little corners of work, and together we're working towards the goal of healing it all.
Yeah, if you're the type of person that's interested in activism, you're going to be the type of person that it's hard to compartmentalize, as you just said, right? If you're the type of person that's interested in activism, it's going to be hard to say like, well, I'm only interested in this kind. Some people can compartmentalize, and that's great, good for them. But like for a lot of activists, it's hard to do that. And I think you're right that like having a particular focus can help you. It can help the cause, and it kind of ties into a little bit of what we talked about earlier in this episode. Like, don't be crippled by guilt and shame. Like, not only can't you fix everything, it's not your responsibility to fix everything.
And understanding that is definitely self-care.
Absolutely.
Acknowledging I don't even want to use the word limitations, acknowledging your bandwidth.
Yeah.
Acknowledging your bandwidth and truly honoring your bandwidth.
Right. For
is
you.
Such self-care.
Right.
Being able to say no to things and not feel guilty and bad about it. Mm-hmm. God, is that like if your friend was frazzled because everybody needs to go.
What is wrong with you?
Everybody
Are you okay?
needs to. I'm sure I've talked about this on the show before. Everyone needs to go and watch that episode of Lizzie McGuire where she gets into activism and charity.
Lizzie McGuire?
Yes, there's an episode where she gets too into activism and charity that she basically she gets totally she's this 13-year-old. She gets totally burnt out and accidentally gives away all of her things, including her own bed, and her parents help her realize that hey, you have burnt yourself out. You're no good to anyone. You aren't helping the cause that you're championing because you don't even have a place to sleep now. Mm-hmm. So
it's like if you're
go watch that episode.
Picking apples from an apple tree, if you pick too many apples and you start taking the branches and the roots, the tree's not there anymore and you can't get apples from it.
Yeah, remember
the
the giving tree, everybody?
Yeah,
don't be the giving tree.
Don't cut down the tree, and the tree is yourself.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that kind of ties back into those themes. And then also you mentioned ripple effect. I feel like that ties into something we talked about last season when we talked about Pleistocene Park and we talked about virtuous cycles and feedback loops. The butterfly effect cuts both ways. Right? The butterfly effect small things can have large negative consequences, but they can also have large positive consequences. And to your point, if you're I'm going to focus on healthcare, and you just work on healthcare, that might make somebody else free up their time to work on something else, which pays it forward. And then maybe moving the needle on healthcare makes everyone a little freer to do things to help everyone else. And it can sort of like come into fruition that way. For a bit of a contrast, let's hear from Zach Mortis, who we interviewed to talk about the Empire of Tartaria. That was at the beginning of last season. I think it was episode 4 last season, I want to say.
So good.
Yeah, his reply was a touch more succinct. And hey, while we're talking about self-care and self-love today, this is okay. Verbosity is okay. Succinctness is okay. There's advantages to both methods of communication. So if you're verbose, that's
Shut
okay.
up. Oh.
And if you are succinct,
speak up.
Say some damn word. No, yeah, sorry. No, both things are okay. Zach tells us, quote, in this order, join a book club, read your book before bed, go to bed early, end quote.
Man. I will say, I haven't done a book club. I don't think I have the bandwidth for it. But I did get a library card this year. And getting books from the library.
Your book club is you constantly tell me about the shit you're reading. I am your book club. You're like, oh my God, listen to this thing I just read.
I'm just saying, having a book and some sort of deadline on said book, like you got to return your book to the library, helps you read said book. And man, oh man, has reading a book, not on my fucking screen on my phone, not reading an ebook, reading a paper book.
Like a physical book, yeah.
Really has helped put me to bed a number of times.
Yeah.
Haven't gone to bed early, but helps me fall asleep.
Yeah,
So Zach Mortis, good advice.
Same thing. When I go to bed, I like to read like a Playboy or a Penthouse, and it really helps me relax. Those are books, right?
What is even the joke?
It's sort of subverting the idea that like, oh, are those books? No, they're just smut. Get it? There's a joke there. What do you mean? Whatever. You just don't have a good sense of humor.
I don't.
Mr. Mortis is not the only person who gave an answer that had to do with nighttime and going to bed. Our musical producer, whom we also interviewed for a Patreon bonus episode, last season, 2 seasons ago? Season 2. We talked to him about Vehement, about voluntary human extinction. He sent us a response that was slightly evening-oriented. Quote, I am super okay with reading an attribution as long as I am attributed as some lame-o, which is very much like him. So that's why I'm not saying his name, because he only wanted us to attribute him as some lame-o. But he's obviously not lame enough to do our music, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, he continues, I would not describe myself as self-caring, but I am sane. Some things that help keep me balanced. I walk alone at night a lot. This forces reflection and keeps me thinking introspectively rather than about the rest of the world. To countermand the above, I do ecstatic stuff as well, playing music, video games with high reflex or pattern recognition skill caps, listening to appliance noise. That's a new one. I didn't know he did that.
I'm sorry, what?
Listening to appliance noise.
What does that mean?
Eating and drinking good stuff, etc. This takes me out of my mind.
Explain to me what listening to I'm giving him a little bit of a hard time.
I don't know what he means by that.
I need to know what listening to appliance noise means.
I think our bonus episode for this...
I'm going to text him and ask.
We're going to talk about what the hell our music producer means when he says, I like to listen to appliance noise. He has another bullet. If I'm thinking too hard about deadlines, viruses, or midterm elections, I plan fun stuff for the future and get it on my calendar. Basic light at the end of the tunnel shit. None of this is revelatory or special, and I'm fairly neurotypical, but it's been working thus far over a pretty batshit couple of years. End quote. I like the light at the end of the tunnel thing. I think being able to anticipate things is like a huge part of our enjoyment. Like I know even like for trips, like you go on a trip, it's like a week and a half. But the anticipation value of that is like 2 months, right?
Like
you
can just get there.
Well, it's not can just get there. It's that I'm looking forward to it.
Can just get to that trip. Then I'll survive.
Right.
No, but agreed. The having stuff to look forward to, and that was part of what made the quote unquote lockdown phase of the pandemic so difficult for a lot of people was not being able to have that, and not being able to have that on both the small and large scale. Yeah, you couldn't plan a trip to go visit your family or a fun trip to go somewhere else. You also couldn't go to the movies. You couldn't go to dinner. You couldn't go and do those little things that like really make life worth living.
Yeah.
And it's hard to to remember to keep incorporating those things in your daily life as you can.
Right.
As is safe and possible to do.
As a quick aside here, we totally recognize on the show that COVID is still around and the numbers are as high as they ever have been in certain points of the pandemic. So we're not saying like, man, isn't it great that that's over? But
It's
we
not
are
over.
But
It's
we
not
are in
over
a
at all.
different phase where
We're post-vaccine.
we're post-vaccine and we're in a phase where there's enough immunity, or at least a combination of immunity and feeling of comfort. Some of it is truly psychological.
Right.
That more people are doing more things. It has a different feel to it than
Right.
the early pandemic did.
And it would be so nice. It would be so nice if we could still wear our masks at these things that
Yeah,
we do.
well.
Because that would really help. Like, go to the movies, but wear your mask. Getting political on the podcast.
Yeah, that's political in 2022. Yay. All right. Anyway,
Wearing your mask is self-care. How's that?
I mean, it's also others.
It's self-care and community care.
Yeah.
Wear your mask. It's fine.
Another two people that replied to us also had answers that were evening/sleep oriented. If you recall back in season 1, we talked to some tulpamancers and tulpas. And then in season 2, we had an interview with Nikto and his tulpa Suksi.
God bless the tulpas.
Well, guess what? They both replied to my question
God.
about self-care. So we get to hear what self-care looks like to a tulpa.
Talk about the privileges of having a podcast.
I know. And so for those of you guys that are not longtime listeners, what a tulpa is it's a deliberately created, individuated personality that exists in the mind space of the humans that create them. I think that's as succinct as a definition as I can give you about what a tulpa is. An imaginary friend on steroids.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Okay. So Nikto tells us, it's important to take some time to do something nice for yourself. So on my weekends, I will put on some relaxing music, take my time getting out of bed, and take time making my breakfast. I usually am running around in the mornings, so taking some time to relax and do something nice for myself really helps, end quote. And then this is what Suksi had to say, and I'll try to read this. Should I try to read this with the accent in which it was typed? Or is that I'm like just setting myself up for failure?
I would not read it in an accent. You can just tell our listeners, Suksi has a bit of a Scottish accent?
Scottish accent,
Yeah.
yeah. So, okay, I will say the words as written, but I'm not going to try to do like the full-blown accent.
Don't do an accent.
Suksi says, get yourself some more sleep. I didn't even need to sleep, but I still take naps just because. Sleep is hella important for your mental state, and too many peeps ignore that. Also, take time to brush your teeth. It ain't a chore, it's taking care of yourself.
That is
End quote.
so true. Brush your teeth. Brush your teeth. And also, try to not feel guilty if you can't. No, but that's a thing for like people,
Yeah.
especially people with ADHD or overwhelm or burnout. You're told like you're supposed to brush your teeth at least twice a day or after every time you eat. And sometimes that can feel too overwhelming. And so then you just like go, I didn't do it at all. If I didn't do it twice, then I just shouldn't do it at all. I am overwhelmed. Brush your teeth when you remember. Brush your teeth when you can. If it's 1 time a day, that's better than 0 times a day. If you can floss, great. If that's all you can do, just do what you can when you can and try to not hold yourself too much to the like, you better do it this many times or else, because then you're going to go, well, I didn't do it that many times, so I'll just do 0. No, anything is better than nothing. It is worth doing things half-assed.
Yeah, and yeah,
Half-assed things.
anything that's worth doing is worth doing half-assed.
Do it.
And I did like that Suksi was talking about brushing your teeth because Susie doesn't have a physical body, so I thought that was cool.
Susie knows what's going on.
But yeah, she knows what's going on. It's about taking care of yourself, and even something that feels like I should do this every day is actually like that's self-care too. It's
Right.
You know, if you start adding these things up, they can make you feel all right. Like if you brush your teeth and then, do like a nice face wash. Or maybe like you take a nice shower, brush your teeth, and then do a nice face wash, and then put like some lotion on or something.
Why would you wash your face after you took a shower?
Look, man, I'm just trying to string some things together.
I like your morning routine.
Whatever.
That you definitely don't do.
But I do some things. Oh, you literally
giving
just
you a hard time.
You literally just said that you shouldn't feel guilty for missing stuff, and
Yeah.
now you are just tossing bombs of guilt and shame.
No, I
across
just think it was funny how
the
clear
table.
it was that this wasn't your morning routine.
No, this is not my morning routine. No, my morning routine is like brush my teeth, put on deodorant, and I'm done.
That's a good morning routine.
Pretty much it. But adding some of these things in, adding in, at the end of the day, taking a shower, adding in, I don't know, what's a example? The skincare stuff that can
Wash
make
your
you feel
face.
good.
Yeah.
So I like that Suxi said that. She also said that doesn't even need to sleep, but she still takes naps just because. And I think that's cool too. Like that's, both Nikto talked about that too, about taking his time getting out of bed on the weekends.
Right.
And that's another thing in our culture is just like the less you sleep, the better of a person you are.
Ew.
It's like, I only sleep an hour and a half.
Guess what? 99% of people who say that, fucking liars.
Yeah. A, they're all liars. B, shut the hell up. Sleep is good. Sleep is something that we all need to do. And
How
it
else
can be enjoyable.
is your spinal fluid going to get up into your brain and literally wash it? That's what happens when you sleep.
Is that like
Spinal
for
fluid
sure?
goes up. And yes.
Really?
Yes. It is real. I don't know why, but it's real.
That is very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Learning new things is self-care.
For me. For a lot of people.
I'm putting the next two replies adjacent to each other because they share a common element of protecting your precious time, which I think is definitely a key pillar of good self-care. Remember the person I interviewed offline for the Twin Flames Universe episode? They got back to me too.
Oh,
So,
boy.
Here's what they had to say. Quote, so I guess the most important thing is setting good boundaries as far as my time. When researching or looking up stuff on the cult, and here they're talking about Twin Flames Universe, I find myself going down rabbit holes and reliving past traumas, so I have to limit the amount of time that I can spend on it, and also picking specific times during the week to do research. I found that if I research stuff when I have a task or a job to do later, it can sort of deregulate me for the rest of the day. So I definitely pick and choose days that I'm going to research things and the days where I need to be productive. On those days, I don't research cult stuff. And this is more applied to my own CPTSD, but could be helpful for an extremism researcher, is immediately afterwards spending time outside with friends, pets, or family if family is not stressful. This can kind of help break up the mood away from it, and you're sort of able to compartmentalize better. The same goes with a good walk or strenuous workout. It can help you get some distractions going. End quote. So you can see here they're talking about, like, actually it was funny. They said this could be helpful for an extremism researcher, and that's the exact thing that Travis View said was, I like to go outside.
Right.
So there's that again. And then also, like putting boundaries on your time, right? It's kind of what you were saying earlier about saying no to things, but also this person compartmentalizes like ugly research days with, against days that need to be productive. And then on those days, they don't do that. So I think that's another good thing. And our friend Molly Maeve Egan also had some things to say about protecting your own time first. And again, for those of you who are newer listeners, that's somebody we interviewed last season. She co-wrote a book called Behind Blue Curtains about abuse in the Amish community. I encourage you to go listen to that episode. I think we called it The Blue Curtains. She says, "Hi, Chris and Kayla. My answer is a combo of not letting anything get in the way of yoga class or my chiropractor appointments, and finding peer support networks, counseling, and groups in today's absence of quality, accessible mental health care, aka therapy. But I also indulge in podcasts like yours, especially true crime, or shows like SVU. And while that feels like self-care and moderation, I have to monitor old coping skills like these that still feel good but can turn into avoidance." I think she makes a good point here. Like, so first, great that she also talked about protecting your time and putting your own time first. Right. Like I see that like with, successful people, like that's one of the things they say they do is like protect my own time first.
Right.
My time is my most important piece of my calendar, and then other people get time. And I like that she does that with her yoga class and her chiropractor appointments. But then she also talks about this difference between avoidance and self-care. And I know that I
do that.
Frequently those bleed together over each other for me. Like she says, watching SVU, for me, it's like playing video games.
Right.
And like there's definitely some harm reduction there. And then it's better for me to be playing video games than, whatever else for hours on end. But it's probably better for me still to not be playing the video game for hours on end. But here again, I try not to feel guilty about it because that's counterproductive.
Right. Coping skills help you cope.
Right.
Even if they maybe have downsides, they help you cope.
My last little category, I guess, of responses involve folks that hit the physical activity and physical care side of self-care. We heard from the very first person I ever interviewed for the show.
Oh, shit.
Way back in
Who even is
season
that?
1, episode 4, I spoke with a friend of mine named Gareth, and who was an expert on Star Citizen.
Yes, ma'am.
And still is an expert, by the way. Do you know what their funding numbers are up to?
I don't want to know. I really don't. I forgot about that whole thing existed.
So keep in mind, when we did our Star Citizen episode,
Oh, God.
back in May of 2019, the number was at $216 million, an astronomical sum. So do you want to know what they are at as of today in 2022?
Yes, I do.
$453 million.
I think
They've
that's
more
bad.
than doubled their funding.
I think that's maybe bad. I think that maybe they shouldn't have $500 million.
Well, I was talking to Gareth recently, and he was saying they have been putting content out. Like, they have been updating their games. So I think it's sort of the same conclusion we had at the time, which is like, this is crazy, but also like, I don't know, people like it and they're doing stuff. Like, they're not absconding with the money.
Right.
They're just taking an awful lot for what they're outputting. I don't know. It's go listen to our episode, I guess, if you want.
This is like a
Season
clip,
1,
this is like
episode
turning
4.
into a clip show.
I know, right? But yeah, that's a lot of money. It's nearly $500 million. Or to put it in perspective, Jeff Bezos could only personally fund the entirety of Star Citizen 355 times before he went broke. So that's a lot of money.
Do you hear that sound?
What?
You hear that sound?
What's that sound?
That's the sound of me sharpening my guillotine.
Great. We do not condone violence here on Culture Just Weird. Anyway, here's what Gareth had to say. Quote, "My biggest thing has just been exercise as both a mental and physical form of self-care. I also learned the importance of skincare products, especially with the sunshine being so damaging." End quote.
Wear your SPF, everybody.
Yeah. I thought that was cool because it was like, oh yeah, he's the only person that mentioned skincare.
Right.
And I think it's cool that and he's like a masculine dude and he's talking about skincare. I think that's pretty cool. Like, that's something that I think traditionally has not been an avenue open to men in our society.
Masculinity is like about getting burnt by the sun, and like if you're gonna get in a car crash, you're gonna die like men and not wear your seatbelt.
It's manly to get skin cancer and die early.
It's really not.
So
it's not feminine to wear sunscreen and take care of your biggest organ in your body.
Yeah, and I do off and on. Like, sometimes I'll get on a kick, and I'm trying to build the habit if I can. But I will say that, like, when I do kind of get on more of a skincare kick,
Sure.
where I'm like, I'm doing my nightly facial wash and like moisturizer stuff.
Right.
It feels nice.
Right.
Makes you feel nice.
Well, I think that's another thing.
Men, you deserve to feel nice too.
There can be a lot of pressure to have like a skincare routine that you do every day, and you must do this, that, and the other. And it's like, yeah, if that works for you, great. And if it doesn't, if sometimes you do it and sometimes you don't, that's also okay.
Common theme.
Wear the sunscreen as much as you can, but in terms of like doing your routine, it's okay if it's not an every single day thing, and you don't have to feel guilty about that.
Is that the title of the pod? Like, don't feel guilty.
Don't feel
like,
guilty.
That's the today's theme. I also heard from our friend over at Recovering Hunbot, and I thought that her response was pretty appropriately themed because if you recall, the episode where we talked to her was our episode on Team Beachbody. That was over in... Team.
With an M.
Team, not Teen Beachbody. Team, which is an MLM. So the exercise theme of her response really made sense here. She says, quote, "It is a bit of a struggle for several reasons. But to work on this," and again, the prompt was self-care routines.
Right.
"But to work on this, I now have a Fitbit, which is helping me get up and move. I am working up to 10,000 steps a day. Right now, the average is between 3,000 to 5,000. My best day was over 13,000, which I totally felt the next day. I also get a meal prep kit that has 4 dinners in it. My menu excludes red meat, and I opt for seafood and chicken. Since the other members of my household do not eat like I do, as in like green things and healthy, I get 2 meals, dinner and lunch, ready for the next day. After I'm able to do 10,000 steps in a day with ease, I want to get a bike. I used to race, but that was many moons ago. End quote. So here, Recovering Hunbot is... Do we say her name? And I don't remember whether we said her name. I think she says it, but like just to be safe, I'm not going to say it. Whatever. She has a channel called Recovering Hunbot, so if you want to go subscribe to that, she talks about MLM stuff. But yeah, here she's talking about exercise and moving.
Yeah, finding ways for movement to be incorporated into your life is great, and that's going to look different for everyone. For some people, it's subscribing to the 10,000 steps idea. For some people, it's just getting out and going for a walk, like we've talked about. For some people, it's going to be sitting in your chair and like stretching, and for some people, it's going to be laying in your bed and stretching. Like, there's no moral judgment on what kind of movement is best or how much movement you should be doing. It's about what makes your body feel good, what makes you feel good, and finding those. I love that Recovering Hunbot has found those ways to fit the way she likes to eat that makes her feel good, the way she likes to move that makes her feel good into her life. And that's something that like we can all be doing a little bit, and not to be like, oh, we all need to be like working out, eating. No, it's about moving your body in a way that feels good and eating in a way that makes you, that you like.
Yeah, I used to like doing, before I got my goddamn tennis elbow, I used to like lifting weights and playing basketball. Now it's more about leg stuff and hiking until I can get my elbow back in shape. But yeah, I it's always like after a hike or after like a couple games of basketball, my body feels really good. Like
Right.
it's, and that there's sort of this like, I don't know what the word is. It's like this euphoric exhaustion, where
Right.
you're like, I'm exhausted, but it feels good. So I like that. And last but not least, we heard back from LaMuffin, which is the Reddit name of the Throwawalian community super moderator, the guy that was somehow able to maintain a healthy online community containing skeptics, believers, and skeptics who wanted to believe in close encounter experiences. Throwawalian was about some believers in a close encounter experience with aliens.
So glad LaMuffin got back to us.
I know. LaMuffin is awesome. And also shout out to Throwawalian folks. Hope you're staying salty and listening to some good bluegrass and shooting for those immobile goalposts still. Immobile goalpost.
Say immovable?
Immovable goalpost?
Yeah.
Yeah, but immobile goalpost is a tongue twister.
Yeah, it's
I
way
just
harder
discovered
to
it.
say.
Typing it was fine.
Immobile goalpost. Immobile goalpost.
Immobile
goalpost. I can't say it. Goalpost. Immobile.
All right, I'm going to start a
goalpost.
Reddit community called Immobile Goal.
The rural juror.
Rural juror. All right, here's what LaMuffin had to say. Quote, I have quite a few self-care routines that I've built up over the years. The first and probably most impactful to me is meditation. This one seems to be repeated ad nauseum, and that's for good reason. Mindfulness really does wonders for mental health. I started with a 2-minute daily meditation about 7 to 8 years ago, and I've worked my way up to 2 10-minute sessions per day. Now that I've built that quote-unquote muscle, I can take a deep breath at any point in the day and come back to the calm meditation state. Boy, that sounds pretty good. Moving the body is also very helpful. Running or lifting weights is great, but even just a short 1-minute stretch break when you're stressed makes a huge difference.
You want to know why?
Are you a scientist? Are you a medical professional?
No, but I can tell you one of the reasons why any sort of movement is like feels really good and is like great for your body.
Why?
Because the lymphatic fluid in your body, unlike blood, which is pumped through your body via the muscle of your heart, lymphatic fluid, and I am quoting my dietitian on this, who is like educated in exercise science and dietetics, moving the body moves lymphatic fluid. Lymphatic
the only
fluid
way.
does
She's right
not
about that.
move unless you move. And so that's why it's not about like making sure you're running real hard and lifting those weights and burning all. It's not about like burning calories or anything like that. It's just about
It's also okay to run real hard.
absolutely. But what I'm talking about is moving that lymphatic fluid. Any sort of movement is good enough. And sometimes we just need to allow ourselves to be good enough.
Yeah, you have a series of lymphatic they're basically vessels, the same way you have blood vessels, except there's no heart for the lymphatic system.
Right.
I don't know why our poor lymphatic system didn't get a heart. I feel like that's kind of an oversight.
Yeah, God.
So whatever. But yeah, so the only way that it moves around is by literally, it's just the pumping action of like moving your arms and
Right.
legs and body. Continuing with what LaMuffin was saying, other self-care techniques would be showering and shaving regularly and connecting with family and friends regularly.
Oh, that's a good one that we haven't really talked about, like the social, like self-care can also be social connection.
Hanging out, yeah, especially if you're like an extrovert. And actually, even honestly,
no, even if you're an
introverts,
introvert, anybody,
even introverts.
we need it. Even if you're an introvert, we need it. And even if you are neurodivergent, everybody needs some sort of connection, whatever that is for you.
I don't know, I vacillate back and forth whether I'm introverted or extroverted.
They're not real.
Because I think they're not real
categories.
because like I'm always like, oh man, I don't want to go hang out with so and so, and then I hang out with so and so, and I'm like, man, that was awesome. I'm so glad I did that.
Right.
It's like every single time, right? LaMuffin finishes up here saying, of course, these are all just my own self-care routines, and others may have different techniques that work better for them. I don't believe it to be one size fits all type of thing. Anyway, great question, and I hope y'all have a great day. Couldn't agree with him more about the one size fits all thing too.
Absolutely. It's
like
about,
we've been saying here, maybe movement for you is about stretching, maybe it's about running, maybe it's about weights or swimming or basketball or yoga.
right.
And maybe your self-care is more oriented along something mental like meditation versus something physical, or maybe it's about brushing your teeth or getting more sleep. There's a lot of different options, and that's kind of why I referred to it early on as like a toolbox, right? It's a toolbox. Here's all the tools and all these other folks' toolboxes. Pick and choose. Hopefully we gave you some ideas here. That was actually the last of the responses. Anything you want to add to anything anybody said there? Did
I
that
feel like
sentence
you
make sense?
have more to say.
Why do you feel like that?
Because I feel like you're not putting a button on this. What's going
that's
on? What else do you
almost
have
it.
up your sleeve?
That's almost it. We'll get to that, but before I get to what's up my sleeve, so I know we basically replied like in line to everything that we reacted in line. So there's nothing to really ask you here in terms of like which one was your favorite. But I do want to ask you, because I want to talk a little bit about our self-care stuff. What are some things that you do, Kayla, for self-care?
Remembering to take my Adderall
That's good.
is honestly my biggest
take your
one
medicine,
right now.
folks.
Yeah, remembering to take that, because then it's a much different day for me when
How do you remember to do that? Do you like set a reminder in your calendar, or
That's a great question. And I don't have any
do you put a
system in
Post-it
place.
note? I
Nope.
think you need a system.
I have them sitting on my end table, so they see them.
We should train one of our cats to bring you.
I see them.
Okay, all right.
I do. I have built in a system of like, when I eat my morning meal, I take whatever vitamins, medications, whatever that I need to take for the day. I take them with my morning meal. And so if I'm planning on taking my Adderall that day, that is when I take them. And that is when I'm able to have the kind of day that I want.
Good.
I will be able, if I remember to take my Adderall, I will be able to remember to do other self-care things that I want to do, like checking items off of my to-do list that I need to do, handling the chores that I need to do.
Checking items on a checklist is pretty good, y'all.
Paying
that
the
counts.
bills that I need to pay, making the appointments that I need to make, exercising. And that is another thing that goes along with having an ADHD diagnosis. Exercise is helpful with managing symptoms. I don't know why, but supposedly cardio in the morning is like real good for helping to manage the symptoms. Eating protein in the morning is real helpful to manage the symptoms.
Eggs.
So those are those are some of the things that I do to set myself up for even being able to like move through my day in a reasonable way. Figuring out ways to incorporate movement that aren't like based in punishment or like anything punitive of like, oh, I gotta, work off that meal, like anything that's about any exercise that comes from a place of like, I need to do this in order to earn something to eat or burn off something that I need to eat or need to change the way my body looks or need to change the functioning of my body. Those are not self-care for me. Those are all things that come from a negative place. And self-care when it comes to movement, for me, I want to come at it from a place of, I want to get my body moving. I want to help manage my ADHD. I want to move my lymphatic stuff around. I want to get the benefit of the endorphins. I want to break up my day. Like sometimes having some sort of exercise can just help break up like the monotony of a work day. And finding new things that can fit into that framework for me is really helpful. Like I just found something the other day called Join, Joyn.
Mm-hmm. It's not how you spell join.
It's not how you spell Join. It's how you spell this platform. It's an online platform where there's just like exercise videos, and it's all different kinds of movement, and it is all it comes from a place of accessibility and size inclusivity. And it's so nice. It's so nice to be able to go to like an exercise class on the internet, and it's about just like moving your body in a kind and loving way and not a punishing way, and that's been really helpful the last little bit.
That's really nice.
Yeah. I'm sure there are other things that that I do on a day-to-day basis. Those are the big things that are coming to mind, but I could probably talk for hours about this. So I would also like to ask you, what are some things that you do?
I like there's a lot. I liked everything you said about activity being like positive oriented, like non-punishing. I am much more likely to do something if I don't see it as like a chore, if I see it instead as like, oh, I'm gonna go play basketball, fun, or I'm gonna go swim or something, that's fun, or even going on a hike with a friend or something like that, right? Like it's fun. It's not
you're
like
checking two things off the box. You're doing movement. You're doing social.
That's true. Yeah.
Getting outside, getting that vitamin D.
Is where
oh my
it's
God.
at.
Efficiency of self-care.
Yeah. But I'll add to that. I also like progress. Like progress is fun to me. That's part of why I like the weightlifting, is because I like to be able to say like, ooh, this week I'm lifting, 100, and last week it was 95 or what. So I like having that sort of like, week to week progress feels kind of fun. It's sort of like from a gamey standpoint almost. My other self-care things, like I've talked about this on the show before, but I've taken up like art, like drawing and digital art as sort of a hobby lately, and I've
You're
found
really
that
good at it.
I'm okay. I've felt that to be pretty rewarding. It's sort of like playing video games where it's a bit of like a distraction, but it feels more like fulfilling than just dropping in front of the computer screen for several hours.
From an outside perspective, you are a more balanced person since you have started your art. I would say that is I can't say it's quantifiable words.
Quantificative.
That. But I will say that I have noticed and observed that.
Yes. And, a lot of the things that we already talked about are also on my list. Being in nature, we talked about that. Just reminding myself that the world goes on, right? Touching grass, those things are good. Seeing a sunset, seeing beautiful things that still exist no matter, what bullshit thing is happening on Twitter.
Right.
That's really nice.
Ooh, I have two things that I didn't say.
Ooh, drinking water.
Ooh, okay. Drinking
three
water.
Things.
Lots of water. No, I have two things that are like really like you can do this right now, fast things to do that have been really helpful to me. One, if you feel anxious or overwhelmed, put an ice pack on your chest.
Oh, yeah.
Sit with an ice pack on your chest for a little bit. Helps you, helps
ground you.
Helps ground me. And same thing, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling stagnant, if you're feeling overwhelmed, shake. I think we've talked about shaking on this podcast before.
Yeah.
Like, how you can like wring your hands? Do that with your whole body. Shake your body for a minute, and it helps.
Yeah. I also, for me, therapy and medication is on my list. One person mentioned therapy, but I feel it bears mentioning because self-care means medical self-care in some cases. Sleep is big for me too. My sleep can get really derailed when things are going stressfully. And I try to make sure I at least get enough, even if it's at weird hours. And there's a bunch of other things I can list. Maybe we'll probably talk about this a little bit in our like Patreon polls. Probably do some additional posting there about what we all do for self-care. Anyway, I thought all those answers were really awesome. If any of you guys are listening to us right now, thank you so much for sharing your self-care strategies with us, particularly because I feel this kind of question is actually like borderline kind of a personal, almost intimate question. So I really appreciate you opening up your heart like this for the show. But actually, there's one more person that we haven't heard from yet that did get back to us.
Who?
I spoke again with QAnon researcher and friend of the show, Mike Rothschild, and I caught up with him on his strategies for self-care. So I want to ask you about sort of like what your personal mental health routine is. Because I mean, this work, this like conspiracy, extremism research, I know is like super emotionally taxing. Working in this space, what do you do to keep yourself sane and healthy?
Sure. That's a great question. And what I do is I treat this work like work. I have working hours. Usually about 8:30 in the morning, about 5 or 5:30, sometimes a little bit earlier if I've got something going on with my kids. That's my work time. That's when I'm in all of the awful places and watching the terrible videos and reading all the anti-Semitic garbage. That's my work day. And when I'm done, I try to log off. I spend that time with my family. Starting to see more friends again now that the restrictions are easing a little bit. I'm not up all night every night diving into the weirdest corners of this. I log off on the weekends. I try to spend as little time as I can on social media on the weekends. I try to devote that time to my family or just doing other things around my house. At nighttime, I don't go on Twitter. I watch something on Netflix, or I watch a movie, or I try to get sucked into the normal things that the rest of us do to entertain ourselves, to indulge in storytelling. I love sports, all that stuff. I play a lot of baseball with my kids. So, I try to keep this stuff in the place where it belongs, which is my work day. And when I'm not doing that, I try to give it as little of my attention as possible, because I know it's all going to be there the next day. Right. Whatever viral thread's going around, if I miss it, I miss it. There's going to be another one. As much as this stuff penetrates into our daily discourse, it does not require my attention 24/7. And I think more highly of myself than to do that. And I've seen it happen to people. I've seen people who are just way too deep into this work get completely sucked in by it. And I don't want that to happen to me. I don't want to look back on my life and say, man, I wish I'd spent less time on super racist Telegram and more time playing with my kids. That's not okay to me. So that's what I do, is I try to treat this as a job the way everybody else treats their job. And when I'm done with it, I'm done with it for the day. And then, it'll be there when I come back to it in the morning.
That's a great technique. Do you ever find it, and I'm asking this because I find this challenging for myself, is just sometimes or maybe even frequently, depending, but the sort of the bleed over, I maybe not as strict as you are. And maybe that's where maybe that's where my issue comes in.
I'm not always that strict, but I try.
Yeah. Maybe that is the answer, is try to be disciplined about it, because I do find myself being I'm going to go on Twitter, when I probably shouldn't. Yeah. So do you find that you do that? And if so, do you have a strategy for being do you have a little rule of thumb or anything that helps you maintain that boundary?
I try to just focus on whatever I'm doing. So if I'm at one of my kids' baseball practices, I will focus on that. And, whatever's going on Twitter, it'll be there another time. Maybe I will take a quick look at night before I start watching something, but then I'm done. So it's hard because, of course, now with, as we talk, we've got the war going on. And then, there's constant information coming in about that. And it's actually stuff I'm really interested in. But at the same time, there has to be a point where I do other things and know that all of that stuff is still going on. I can contribute to the discourse tomorrow, but tonight I'm watching The Expanse, and that's going to be cool, and I'm going to enjoy that. And then whatever tomorrow brings. And I just try to live my life and enjoy the things I enjoy, and sort of have everything in its proper place.
I love The Expanse.
Yeah.
Well, that's it for me today. If you have anything else you want to add or plug or talk about or anything, now's the time.
Sure. You can still get my book on QAnon, The Storm is Upon Us. You can find me on Twitter at RothschildMD. I'll have hopefully some more announcements coming soon about other stuff I'm working on. So I'm out there, and I'm not that hard to find.
All right. Thanks for coming back on the show, Mike.
Absolutely.
Really,
I'm happy
really
to.
Appreciate it. So it was good hearing from Mr. Rothschild again. I actually talked to him for a lot longer than that. I think we're probably going to put some of that in a future episode. We talked about what he's working on right now and how it relates to some of the QAnon stuff and all that. But
I need updates. I need updates on what's going on in the world of QAnon. And
well, I don't want to spoil too much. He's definitely keeping up with that, but he's also taking a broader approach with his latest work. He's working on another book. I won't spoil it. But yeah, he's sort of getting into he's doing the context thing, right? He's getting deep into the history.
Right.
and looking into like why do some of these tropes keep coming back and back. It actually ties a little bit into what we were talking about with Mike Caulfield the other day. But today we're here to talk about his answer to the self-care question.
Right.
And so his answer is pretty much along the lines of protecting your time, right? So it was like that was kind of one of the sub themes we identified, right? And so he likes to be very diligent about when he's on work and off work. It sounds actually very similar to the answer that Twin Flames Universe person gave us about like only do the research on the days when you know that you're not going to be productive otherwise.
And it also relates to Stephanie McNeil's answer from the final episode of last season.
Oh yeah, we did ask her this question.
She also said basically, like she said that she doesn't even go on social media on the weekends.
Right.
And I've thought about that a lot. I have not yet done it. And Mike Rothschild reminded me of this, and I probably will not yet do it, but it is good to be reminded that it's not great self-care to be on the social media at all hours of the day, every day. It's probably it sounds like it's been very helpful to people like Mike Rothschild and Twin Flames Universe person and Stephanie McNeil and others to be able to figure out how to block off time for that and not just accessing the muck and the mire 24/7.
Yeah. One of the things that I find challenging about that, actually, let me first say, I almost, like, one of my episode ideas for this season is, like, to somehow, like, personal blog my extraction from Twitter. Like, I kind of want to extract from Twitter and talk about, like, how that goes. So, TBD, we might do an episode on that. I'm not sure how much.
Culture just weird, maybe getting off of Twitter.
Yeah, we'll see. Like, tweet at me if you don't want that to happen. If you're like, no, we love your Twitter. But I don't think it adds like a ton of value. Like I think to really get a ton of value out of Twitter, you do have to be like extremely active and be posting a lot about things that are trending. And that's just not something that I do. And so I think that like my own personal negative from Twitter probably outweighs the positive we get from reminding people that we publish every other Tuesday, which is like the main thing. So maybe we'll be getting off Twitter. I don't know. We'll see. In terms of the compartmentalization, I know I struggle with that a lot, and I think part of why I struggle with it a lot is because I use the Culture Just Weird Twitter as almost sort of also my personal Twitter, so it's like really hard for me to separate that. That's something I've meaning to work on. In terms of like what are some actionable sort of processes, for me it's about crowding out. Like I have a hard time being like, I'm just not going to do this. I have a much easier time replacing going online with something else. So that's where we can get into things like maybe
drawing.
I'm coping by playing video games or the drawing. Yeah, exactly. So
reading a book,
spending time doing that stuff, watching TV, going on a walk.
I find myself picking up a book and then sometimes if my phone is within arm's reach, I'll reach for the phone. It's not good. Yeah. Especially if somebody with ADHD.
I know.
It's much more rewarding for the dopamine to have the scroll than to read the book. So maybe if you're going to read your book, put your phone where you can't reach it.
Yeah. So I know Mike and some of our other respondees mentioned that it's good to sort of like set specific like calendar boundaries. And to that, I will add, if not doing something is difficult for you, try crowding it out with something else.
Right. Good advice.
All right, Kayla. So there's no criteria again, because this is not a cult. We just talked to a bunch of previous friends of the show. So we're not going to go through the criteria today because we're not judging if something's a cult or not. Maybe we can call this episode "Is Self-Care a Cult?"
I think
self-care
that there
can be a cult.
Is absolutely an interesting episode to do about the wellness appropriation of self-care and like the grift appropriation and the like optimization culture of self-care. Like
that's a slippery slope.
We got to be careful with the word self-care because there's some bad actors that utilize it to like not really make you feel any better about your life. And
like the demand for it too. Like that's the other thing I hope we don't get across is like sometimes it feels like there's a demand for self-care. Like are you not self-caring? You better fucking self-care.
Right.
Which is like completely counterproductive, right? So it's kind of like, you know what? If you forget to brush your teeth tonight, if you're not getting good sleep, if you didn't do your hike today or your or your activity tomorrow, whatever, like, it's okay if you miss stuff. Like, it's not, you better do self-care or else, you piece of shit. Like,
Right.
that's not what we want. And we
Right,
don't want
right.
that slippery slope into like, I'm optimizing, I'm doing this routine. It's kind of like we were talking about the skincare routine. Like, if you don't do it every day, then like there's something wrong.
Right.
That is not the case. And we don't want to be getting that across. And I think you're right that there's a slippery slope from like must do self-care to
Right.
like a culty sort of wellness exploitative version of it. Anyway, Kayla, I hope you and our listeners found today's episode helpful and maybe even motivating. I hope we're maybe able to make a small difference for you guys by spreading some good, helpful information around. And next time, maybe I'll talk about something a little more crazy. We'll get to that. So take care of yourselves out there, everyone. This is Chris.
This is Kayla.
And this has been
Self-Care Corner.
Self-Care Corner of Culture Just Weird.